Good morning. The Budget Subcommittee, Sub 5 on Corrections and Public Safety will begin. And we are opening our discussion this morning with the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection on the Ventura Training Center. So do we have the staff who are going to present for that?
Good morning, Chair Skinner and members of the committee. Ken Pimlott, Director of CalFire. And with me today are the three agencies involved in this joint unified effort between the California Conservation Corps and the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I will open this morning giving a brief overview of the proposal, and then each of the department representatives will provide additional information based on that portion of the program and engagement. So I'm Ken Pimlott, Director of CalFire, and before you is a budget change proposal, a budget request for a one-time capital outlay request of $18.9 million and an ongoing appropriation of $6.3 million. The proposal before you is to, over time, repurpose the existing Ventura Conservation Camp, which has been a joint effort between CalFire and the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to provide inmate firefighting crews as part of our broader conservation camp program throughout the state. Those crews provide response to wildland fires, but also on a daily basis are engaged in projects in fire prevention, fuels treatment, and other public safety activities there on the Central Coast in Ventura County. The proposal before you, over time, converts that facility to what's called the Ventura Training Center, and this will provide an opportunity for individuals paroling from the existing conservation camp program, so inmates that are hand-selected by CalFire and the Department of Corrections from throughout the state over time to be interested and be a good fit for a parolee program, or when they leave the conservation camp program, will come into what's going to start off as a 20-member training program. The first set of participants will come in and receive 6 months of training in fire service skills and education, as well as life skills. They then will work their way through and spend 12 additional months working as a hand crew throughout the Central Coast, and also be deployed statewide in response to fires and other emergencies. As a part of this process, these individuals will receive state fire marshal certification in firefighter training, basic emergency medical services training, and also be provided, again, life skills to work towards interviews and all of the skill sets necessary to when they complete the full 18-month commitment of this program. They will be essentially have the playing field level to be competitive for fire service employment, both with CalFire and other potential agencies throughout California, as well as our federal partners, wildland firefighting agencies such as the U.S. Forest Service, and certainly working with the California Conservation Corps in their program. This is a unified, coordinated effort between the three agencies. Again, over time, this will transition up to a total of 80 participants over time that will cycle into this program, and over that same time, the existing inmate firefighting program, those inmates will cycle out and staff other fire crews around the state. As you know, through realignment, the inmate firefighting program, there has been a significant reduction inmates around the state. So this program will provide another opportunity for the state. In addition to our partnerships with the California Conservation Corps, will provide another opportunity to field crews that can do both the resource management and emergency response mission of the state. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy Cameron from the Corps.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Skinner and Senators. I'm Amy Cameron. I'm the Chief Chief Deputy Director of the California Conservation Corps. Our primary role in this program as it relates to the parolee participants is to provide administrative services associated with the parolee participants, including payroll, health benefits, workers' compensation, uniforms, personal protective equipment, things of that nature. And we will also arrange high school services for participants that do not possess a high school diploma or equivalent. So that will really be our involvement with the parolee participation. In addition, the CCC is very excited about the opportunity to have our Corps members train with CalFire and earn and receive certifications that will make them more competitive in achieving employment as firefighters. During this process, we will have 20 Corps members participate in the camp and get all of the services and certifications. And so we're really excited about that opportunity and really think it's an important step for Corps members to be more competitive as they seek employment as firefighters. So with that, I will turn it over to Jerry.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jerry Powers, Director of the Division of Adult Parole Operations. I want to talk briefly about the population, the parole population that will be part of this training. Chief Pimlott has talked about the training component and CalFire's involvement. Essentially, what we are looking at on the parole side is we're going to have 80 parolees who are going to be given an opportunity to receive this firefighter training. Over the course of working on this program, trying to come up with the program design, we've certainly been sensitive to feedback that we've received both down in Southern California as well as from LAO and others who have asked questions and frankly in some instances criticized the program. So I want to address a little bit of those concerns and talk about the population, about the 80 parolees. We've had some pushback or some suggestions that it's not an evidence-based program, and certainly I'd concede that it's not. It's never been done. It can't be evidence-based if it hasn't previously been done. I will say that there will be components of this program that we know reduce recidivism. Certainly supportive services that are going to be provided to the parolees while they're in the program, housing that will be provided to the parolees. They're going to receive a $1,900 a month monthly stipend while they're in the program. And they're frankly going to receive increased employability when they finish this program. I think we have to concede that not everybody will be employed as a firefighter at the end of this program. Some may, but they certainly have other opportunities that I think CCC can talk about and even Chief Pimlott can talk about that this training will qualify them for. We know that by providing supportive services, housing, increasing their employability, that we can reduce recidivism. There's research all over that says that that reduces recidivism. So I think to criticize the program as not evidence-based really is not fair because it's a new program. We've received criticism that we are taking a low-risk population and providing services that may not be necessary. We looked at a little over 1,000 releases from our fire camp system over a period of 6 months and took a really quick look at the population to see what their risk and needs looked like. I can tell you that only 13% of those graduates of our firefighter program, our camp program, had their high school diploma or GED. 13%. That is a significant barrier to employment upon release. CCC offers a high school diploma program as part of this program. 42% of the individuals coming out are deemed high risk by assessment. Based on assessment, 36% are moderate risk. So these are not low-risk offenders that we're talking about here. They have significant needs. There's a reason, frankly, that they went to the state prison system. So I don't think it's fair to criticize the program as that we're taking a low-risk population. What we are saying is we're going to take the best firefighters that we can get in that program and bring them here for the training. The best doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have significant needs. It means they're really good firefighters. The last part of it, dealing with the risk, is that I suspect, and I'm just making a guess or an estimate based on my experience in working with the population, that if we have a firefighter, an inmate firefighter coming out who has stable housing and knows that they have a job, they're probably not going to go and commit to 18 months in this program. I suspect that the majority of the individuals who are going to want to come in this program are lacking in employment and probably do not have stable housing, which, again, we know are significant risk factors. The last criticism that we've heard, or the last one that I will address, I'm sure it's not the last that we'll hear, is that it's not a cost-effective program. I think that when we talk about the inmate firefighter program in the state of California, it's probably the best or one of the best values that the taxpayer gets, in state government. These inmates provide an invaluable service across the state during these wildland fires. They put their lives on the line, and they do it for sometimes years in these camp programs at a significant cost savings to the taxpayers of the state of California. And I think to channel some of that money back into this program that we save back into this program to give those individuals an opportunity to become firefighters or to get jobs in the firefighting field is certainly a worthy and noble cause. So with that, I would close and say we're certainly available for questions.
I'm going to ask the LAO to comment since they have given us some extensive comments on this, and then I'll turn to the dais for some discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caitlin O'Neill with the LAO. We recommend rejecting the proposal primarily because we think it isn't likely to be not to be a cost-effective strategy for reducing recidivism, which the administration has cited as its primary goal with this proposal. We think it's not likely to be effective for 3 reasons. First, it's not evidence-based, so we don't have any reason based on other programs elsewhere to think that this might be effective. And they're not proposing a pilot, nor are they proposing an evaluation that would be either independent or rigorous enough to assess whether this is indeed effective in reducing recidivism. Second, it's targeted at parolees who appear to be among the least likely to need the services. Research suggests that rehabilitation programs that are most likely to be effective if targeted at people who have both a high risk of recidivating, and that risk is rooted in a need for the services that the program in question provides. The administration has not provided a plan to do this. They've provided some statistics that suggest that the fire camp population does contain inmates who have a moderate risk to recidivate. However, it's not clear how they would necessarily select those inmates in particular, or indeed whether those inmates have a risk to recidivate that's related to their need for employment services. Instead, they're proposing to select the best of the best, that is, those who have demonstrated an aptitude to work hard and succeed on the job in the fire camps. Or in other words, it would appear that they're planning to target parolees who essentially have less room for improvement, so to speak, relative to other folks coming out of CDCR. Third, it appears unlikely that the program would lead to employment. This is because the administration has not done a labor market analysis to determine potential demand for graduates of the program. And in the absence of such an analysis, we turn to anecdotal evidence, which suggests that the labor market for firefighters is highly competitive and that there are some significant barriers to entry for those with felony convictions. I'd also note that they haven't provided an analysis of the labor market for the other programs that they've suggested that or other jobs they've suggested that these folks might be eligible for via their participation in the Conservation Corps. Moving on, we think the program is quite expensive relative to other recidivism reduction interventions. For example, we estimate that for the cost of the program, the administration could instead provide cognitive behavioral therapy to over 5,000 inmates annually. And we're also concerned about a large upfront capital outlay investment for a program that appears to be unlikely to be effective and has not been tested through a pilot. Furthermore, it's unclear whether all of the resources requested are fully justified, given that the administration hasn't provided firm plans on all the details of the proposal. And we'd also note that there are other opportunities to train the 20 non-parolee Conservation Corps members, but that wouldn't require implementation of this program. So we recommend rejecting the proposal, and to the extent the legislature is interested in reducing recidivism, we would suggest that it redirect some or all of these resources into evidence-based programs.
So if I could begin with, did LAO consider suggesting it being done as a pilot? And if it were done as a pilot, wouldn't it require almost the same level of resources? That's my first. My second question, did LAO consider what might, in terms of the concerns around job placement for the folks who go through it, did LAO consider what we might build into this to further ensure or create the possibility for a better outcome of job placement? For example, having CalFire adopt a preference for hiring, as they have with vets, for people who have completed this, or having a modification to the EMT licensing so that folks who have completed this program would be able to receive those licenses. Anyway, there's a variety of other things that might have been considered. So I'd like to hear why, or whether LAO considered those, and if not, why not?
We did note, as you heard, that the administration isn't proposing a pilot, and perhaps a pilot here could help establish whether or not our concerns about the effectiveness of this program are founded. We didn't do an in-depth assessment of what resources would be required to implement such a pilot. However, perhaps the administration could answer that question. And then, I'm sorry, your second question about ways to improve the employment prospects. There are potentially some approaches that could be taken here that could involve removing barriers for folks with felony convictions to get EMS certifications is one, for example, that I think you're aware of. So that could be an avenue to pursue. We just note that that's not part of the plan as it exists.
Right, but if you're analyzing it, then you can always suggest improvements to a plan versus simply rejection. But go ahead.
Sure. Drew Soderborg, Legislative Analyst's Office. The only other thing I would add is I think part of the reason why we thought that we didn't want to pursue a pilot program is just because we found it highly unlikely that it would be cost effective on its face. And so we think that resources should be prioritized for programs that are more likely to be effective. I think particularly in the sphere of corrections, there's lots of very rigorous research showing on what works. And so we think those resources should really be, state resources should really be prioritized to the many programs that we know can be effective if implemented effectively. The other thing I would say in regard to whether or not we considered recommending modifying it, given that we think that it's not likely to be cost effective, we didn't go that route, but we would note that it's certainly possible if the legislature is really interested in this and does see more potential in it, then you would want to consider modifying it. We would note, however, we did ask the department, and they can comment more on this, about whether there could be preferences made, and it's our understanding that CalHR requires that the hiring process be competitive, so there could be limits on the extent to which.
Preferences, for example, for vets.
That's right, that's right. And I don't know if the department could speak to the possibility of making preferences for parolees.
Before you respond, is there any other comment that LAO wants to make before I turn to the different representatives of the administration to make their responses? Okay. And maybe do any of my colleagues want to make a few comments so you can respond to all of it? Go ahead, Senator Anderson.
When you're responding, I'm curious how many people you hire every year and how many graduates are going to be coming from this program. When I look at my local fire departments, there's thousands of applicants for every position. And I think trying to work through that system is going to be very daunting. I think it's more likely that they'll be coming to work for you. So I was just curious if we're going to have enough slots. If they were to hire every graduate, would they all be accommodated with a job. I love the idea, and I love the direction. I'm just not sure that this is is going to lead to the outcomes that we want. And the last question I have is, we don't have any comparisons of other programs. Are there other programs that are doing this? I mean, I don't know if this is the only one in the nation, and if it is, then there is no science-based evidence because there's nobody else to compare to. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, because I think that we need to be pushing the envelope with new programs and new ideas.
Senator Bell, did you want to?
Well, two things. First, to CalFire, I just want to say the state of California owes a debt of gratitude to CalFire for their performance this last year in light of the fact that they were severely understaffed. They didn't have the equipment. They needed more resources, and I think our commanders, especially you, Ken, rose to the occasion. And, you know, congratulations on that. You rose to the occasion, and we really appreciate it. If we didn't have the strong leadership from you and your colleagues, it could have been much worse in the state of California, given the fact that the resources you had. But in terms of the budget, it shows me that CalFire needs quickly to increase the resources. Otherwise, we'd be dependent on this kind of disaster preparedness that's relying on other disasters not occurring, if you want to put it bluntly. If other disasters are not occurring, we can kind of do the mutual aid, but if disasters do occur, like say a major earthquake with statewide implications, or fires and earthquakes, which possibly could happen probably pretty easily, I would say. The resources that we have will quickly be overwhelmed. And so we need that emergency response beefed up in the state of California. Now, given that, on this particular proposal, Madam Chair, I'm glad we're holding it. We had the comments from them. It needs to be worked on more. It needs to be shown specifically how it, if it's a new program, that's fine, but it needs to be shown how it reduces recidivism. And we need to have a complete cost of this program given to us. Okay, for example, there isn't anything in here about what these people that are going to be up there, how are they going to get their health care? What's going to, is there a need for additional health care services? Who's going to pay for that? How it's going to be paid for? Those kinds of costs are not identified specifically in this document. And I think, to me, I want to see what the information is. I also want to see how they relate to local government. It appears that the Ventura County Board of Supervisors have written a letter. We need to figure out what's going on down there with Ventura County and find out what kind of approaches would ameliorate Ventura County in terms of cooperative working together with the county on these kinds of services that we're trying to provide. It could be that we could have a program that you're not necessarily going to get people to be firefighters, but they could be there's a lot of other jobs that we can train and transition people into. And it appears to me that they don't necessarily have to be state jobs. They could, if you had a cooperative arrangement with your workforce investment board at the county level, the workforce investment board could work with you in developing transitions to real jobs for people that are in our parole system and in our conservation corps. In other programs throughout the state, the workforce investment boards are working with the building trades to get our corrections inmates to be trained, pre-apprenticeship programs, to be trained to get into various kinds of jobs in the construction industry, at varying levels, not all like the highly skilled ones, but some of them are not as, there's a continuum of types of jobs, for us to look at. Some of these people will have higher skills, others won't, others will have less skills. So we have to look at the continuum of skill sets. But however, we need to have that more comprehensively explained if we can imagine this new program to have an impact on reducing recidivism. It seems to me that the department needs to work better with counties in a general sense because, as I pointed out many times, a lot of the services the county provides in their health care, social service, others are impacted by our failure to reduce recidivism. So it appears that there would be interest in counties to work in a more collaborative way with the parole department rather than have the parole department continue to be sort of a standalone and do things like cover the health care for the parolees and not transition them into the community in a better cooperative spirit with the county health and human services programs. So those are my comments, Madam Chair. I think I'd like to see, yes, if it's a new program, I'd like to see them show how they can reduce recidivism by completing that circle that I'm talking about with the jobs. And again, I had a specific question for Ken. You have many types of jobs. Can you give us a kind of overview of, like, if somebody is interested in working in the fire service in general, they don't have to all be firefighters, right? Can you give us an overview of the various, like, types of jobs that you have in CalFire that might accommodate some of these individuals?
All right, so before you answer that one, I sort of kept a list since I allowed everybody to put out their questions. So here are some of the questions that you've been asked. In response to LAO, what ways they're concerned that this program is not going to be effective, won't result in jobs, the folks that are trained at this high cost getting jobs, so generally that discussion. The number of people CalFire hires each year, whether CalFire could do a preference, who is going to cover the health care costs, and then the last question that Senator Bell asked, what are the other types of jobs that CalFire hires or has other than direct firefighters? I think those were, yeah, go ahead.
Right, thank you, and I will start it off, and then we want to do this as a team because there's a number of areas that this crosses over. First off, thank you, Senator Beal, for the kind words. We as a state have been through some of the most challenging fire seasons in the last several years that we've ever experienced, and it's a team effort. Certainly not just CalFire. It's the two agencies represented here are key, along with our many other partners at the Office of Emergency Services, the National Guard, and beyond. But what we're talking about here today is really front and center with this overall mission of the state to protect resources and people. A couple areas to start with. First off, I want to address the cost and from the capital outlay perspective. So Ventura Conservation Camp has been in our 5-year plan for over 10 years for having these capital outlay improvements done. It has always, obviously for other reasons, has been bumped down, but these capital outlay improvements have been on our books for many years, and so we're just moving these to the forefront to meet this proposal. So it's not going to be a new proposal from that perspective. We're just moving that up front. This camp has needed these improvements for a long time.
So would you be specific about that? So independent of whether we move forward with the training program that's being proposed, the capital outlay for the camp would be necessary regardless?
Correct. Dormitory improvements, the overall facility, different elements of that were needing improvements anyway. Obviously, in light of this program, we are
What's the dollar amount of that capital improvement? That's
18.9 million.
regardless of. Okay.
Yes, and these are, like most of the facilities, particularly at CalFire, they're over, they were constructed prior to 1950. Most of our facilities, over 3/4 of them. So our facilities are aging, and so we've got a very robust capital outlay plan, like many other state agencies, to get those upgraded. And so this was just one of many that we had in our list to get done.
I want to make sure you caught LAOs.
Oh,
I didn't mean to stop you.
Oh, no, that's good.
Trying to make sure
Yeah.
that she saw that there were
on the specific on the capital outlay?
Yes, I just wanted to note that it is our understanding that some aspects of the proposed capital outlay project will be specific to the use of the facility for parolees. That is not for a correctional population. So there will be some differences in the way the dormitories are built than they would be built if this were being renovated to continue to be used for a conservation camp. Also, it's not clear exactly when the capital outlay proposal would have come forward, or kind of what the priority would be for this capital outlay project had this Ventura proposal not come through.
And that's correct. As I indicated, we were redirecting some of the, and retooling some of the work to be specific to the needs of this proposal. Finance.
Department of Finance.
Madam Chair, thank you. Stephen Benson with the Department of Finance. Actually, covering for our cap outlay folks a little bit today too. But so this project, actually, there was about $10.2 million that would have been proposed in the governor's budget even without this. 10.2. And that would have been proposed in the governor's budget even without this project in order to get the facility back in the pipeline, if you will. There is an incremental amount of 8.7 then, that's the balance that is more specific to this particular proposal. But certainly, it was a project that in my time that I've been at finance, it's had some obstacles in terms of financing. It was least revenue at one point, and when we had the Great Recession, kind of threw that off schedule, and so we were bringing the project back forward this fall, or this budget cycle, regardless of this proposal.
Thank you. Now we can have Chief Pimlott and the other CDCR and Conservation Corps, if this is relevant for you to respond to the various questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. So in terms of the number of positions, CalFire, as we hire approximately 400 to 500 seasonal firefighters, new seasonal firefighters every year on average. That's the turnover in our seasonal firefighter classification. From there are a number of permanent professional firefighting career jobs that folks promote to from that. As was indicated throughout the training, most fire departments in the state require emergency medical technician as part of the minimum qualifications to be hired. That is the industry standard, not only across California, but much of the country. The EMT certification does require a background check, and by statute, there are certain, there are felony disqualifications within that, and we certainly recognize that as a challenge to work through. While CalFire does not require the EMT as its minimum qualification, it is a desirable qualification for CalFire firefighters, and most of our firefighters do possess that EMT certification. We are working very closely with the state's Emergency Medical Services Authority and the Department of Health and Human Services to see what opportunity and options we may have as an EMS provider specific to this program, to see if there's opportunity to work through those existing statutes to find a path through that, and we continue to engage the EMS authority on that subject. The real issue is as they, and the benefit here is, and as Director Powers indicated, it's as they go through this process, working and reaching towards this, really this brass ring of the fire service, because it is a profession that is held in high esteem and that folks want the best of the best serving them. And so it's very important that these candidates, these participants in this program, are fully committed, because at the end of the day, there is competition, right? There is competition across the board for these very coveted, highly held and public trust positions. We want those folks to have that feeling when they come through the program. But at the end, this program is designed to provide them with all the tools to be competitive and be successful. But it also, the onus needs to be on these participants to compete for jobs so they truly understand and own that responsibility as they compete with so many others for these positions. But the fire service, and this is a very strong position of the governor and those working on this proposal, that participants in parolee shouldn't be just limited to where the job vacancies are. A very clear opportunity here is that the full suite of job opportunities and careers are out there. It's up to these participants to reach for that brass ring and be successful to get there. Yes, not all of these participants, as Director Powers said, may be successful at the end as they participate, but it's what they gain along the way and the other opportunities that are out there for individuals of this caliber to be employed. Opportunities with the California Conservation Corps, working in a variety of other trades, working in a variety. We've had successful members of the conservation camp program inmates parole out and go to work for municipalities in water and sewer plant certification treatment. They actually have to be certified and have a skill set there because they've been working in our programs treating the wastewater at conservation camps. There are a variety of opportunities. Our federal partners, Forest Service, have a variety of job opportunities, both in firefighting and non-firefighting. CalFire, as Senator Beal asked, has a variety, Bell, I'm sorry, I apologize. Senator Bell, a variety of opportunities. We have water and sewer plant treatment individuals. We have construction trades. We have foresters. In the professional series, we have resource management professionals that are professional positions within the department that are right now at the forefront of engaging in our fuels treatment and our prescribed fire, a skill set that many of these individuals would be part of and have been exposed to at the ground level coming through. So there are a variety of opportunities, and there's a variety of the non-uniform support management services administrative classifications, the full suite that the state utilizes in all departments. Those are all identified and available within CalFire. Our technical services program, in engineering, people literally designing and overseeing our construction projects. So CalFire, just like many state agencies, are supported by a whole host of professionals and non-professional positions that aren't just in firefighting. And lastly, before
How many hires per year?
I don't. We could get back to the committee on that. And lastly, before I turn it over, I want to really reach back in our relationship and partnership with Ventura County and the cities, the sheriff. We just come through the largest fire in the state's history, the Thomas Fire on the Central Coast. And while we may differ in opinion today about where we're at on this proposal, at the end of the day, the working relationship with our partners at the Board of Supervisors, the fire department, the sheriff, the cities, and the many other folks is top-notch. Folks had to work together under the most adverse conditions this last fall, and I cannot understate the level of professionalism of the folks in Ventura County and all the folks they represent. We will be down there next week. They are hosting a public meeting, and all of us will be down again taking and listening to the concerns and comments. So with that, I'll turn it over to my partners.
Thank you. So the California Conservation Corps provides health care benefits for Corps members, and so those costs are associated in this proposal. So we do that for all Corps members, and parolee participants would be eligible as well if they don't have any other means of health care.
Additionally, because they are parolees and they're out of custody, they would also be Medi-Cal eligible as well. The other part of it with respect to potential local impacts to healthcare, mental health care, things like that, this population is coming from fire camps. Their physical health is top-notch. They're fire-ready, I guess, to use that term. I don't know if that is such a term, but I'll trademark it if it isn't. So their health tends to be good. We would look at the firefighter criteria to get into the camp program. The fire camp program would be essentially the same to get into this program, same disqualifying factors. There are some medical conditions that would disqualify them, mental health conditions. And certainly while they're in the program, the expectations would be very high with respect to substance abuse. Positive tests would disqualify them from the program, things like that. So with respect to the healthcare question, I think that's about as much as we can give you at this point.
So my additional questions about whether one of the issues that was raised that is our licensing for emergency medical technicians, I think currently excludes felons, and whether there could be some, whether the departments, any of the departments or the administration have anticipated whether there would be recommended to modify the licensing such that folks who participate in a program like this, who may then also be eligible for record expungement, might be able to then have such licenses, which of course would increase their employability in a variety of related fields. Was there any contemplation of that?
Well, certainly, again, as indicated in the beginning, we are working very closely with the Emergency Medical Services Authority and the Department of Health and Human Services, who have regulatory authority over the EMS certification or EMT certification in California, in coordination with the local Emergency Medical Services Authority that are spread throughout the state. We are diving into the regulations and looking where we would need to make, if there's opportunity to make changes, where we could do that specific to this program. We don't have all of the answers yet, but we are trying to find and working through some pathways that would allow, if it's specific to this program, are there some opportunities that would allow that to occur?
Additionally, there's reference to a nonprofit in the proposal, and it wasn't clear to me. I know that California Conservation Corps, for example, is a nonprofit. Is that the nonprofit that department is referencing, or is the thought that there would be utilized another nonprofit, and in which way?
We're working on scoping an invitation to bid or RFP. They're working on the process now. We're anticipating that it would be a nonprofit other than CCC to provide services for the parolees when they're in the camp. Pre-employment work with them, employment readiness, those kinds of things, life skills type programs. For those hours when they're not either in the Chief's fire training program or in the CCC's high school diploma program, we will have programs for them in those non-hours. So it will be put out to bid here fairly shortly, and we'll get solicitations.
And is it anticipated that any parolee that's part of this that does not yet have a GED, that they would have a GED at the completion?
So the California Conservation Corps, we offer a high school diploma program, and we do that with our partner, John Muir Charter School, and they offer high school diploma services at all of our facilities. And the way our program works is that each Corps member that does not have a high school diploma must attend classroom hours, 10 hours a week at a minimum. So 3 hours typically Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m., earning their high school credits with a credentialed teacher, and then they are working towards their high school diploma, which with our partners, John Muir, we think is achievable after 18 months.
Because certainly we wouldn't want anyone to leave the facility without a GED, because their employment chances would be quite low.
Correct.
That is correct, and that is our goal, and we think it's very achievable. It's been very achievable for traditional Corps members that come in with very few credits sometimes, and within 12 to 15 months, they're able to achieve a high school diploma if they're working hard towards it, which we think this group population will be.
Senator Anderson, did you have other comments or questions? All right. So, I mean, I appreciate LAO's concerns, because the expense is high per individual that we serve. It's comparable, in effect, to our cost of incarceration in a state facility. Now, if the outcomes are, if we were to achieve zero recidivism from such a population, then that's quite a worthwhile expenditure for 18 months. But I think the issues around having more clarity about what positions the folks who are, when they complete this, would really be trained for. In other words, what real job positions would they be eligible for? And the, I think it's already been pointed out that if, for example, the goal were to get into a municipal fire service, that's highly, highly unlikely just because there's so few of those positions even available. But if the goal were another set of goals, for example, it might be. But I think those are not as well articulated at this moment. So what I would like to see is clear identification of the program goals. I would like to see consideration of a CalFire hiring preference for folks who have completed it. I would like to absolutely ensure that a person has a GED. I also am interested, as I mentioned, exploring the modifications to EMT licensing. Again, it could be limited, but and whether there's any, if we pursue this, we want to do it well, we want to do it effectively, but is there a way to do it more cost effectively, I think is also worth looking at.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator
listening
Anderson.
to you brought a question to mind.
Certainly, go ahead.
And that is, we talked about getting the high school diploma in the program. Why wouldn't we, require it to be, you have to have your high school equivalent before you can enter the program, so that while they're serving time, they can be accruing that as one of the early steps of moving towards it. It seems to me that if a person demonstrates their ability to really want it, they're going to have higher success to start with, and then there's no chance of them dropping out of the plan because they couldn't complete the high school or weren't disciplined enough to complete the high school equivalency. I'm worried. I'm worried about that. I'm also worried that we're pursuing career paths that require licenses that they can't qualify for. And I think of all the terrific jobs that are out there, all the terrific career possibilities, not all require a license that we have to jump over hurdles for. And I'm just wondering why we're limiting ourselves to the firefighting aspect as opposed to looking at other career paths that most likely would yield better career opportunities because it'd be easier to hire, higher demand, the demand for applicants wouldn't be as great, like the current fire departments in my district, where you have 2,000 or 3,000 people applying for a single position. It seems to me that there's a lot of plumbers and carpenters and other trades that I know in my district, the economy's changed. There's a lot of construction opportunities, and they're desperate for employees. So I just want to put that on the table because I love the idea that we're taking a more holistic approach for a better outcome in reducing recidivism. I just want to make sure that we're picking a path that actually achieves that goal.
I think that's worth in considering also when we return to this discussion. And additionally, the issue of whether we would have a GED requirement, or at least very close to the completion of the GED. But finally, and I said it beginning, but I didn't put it specifically, that clearer definition of what the role of whatever nonprofit that you were using would have. So those are some of the concerns that I would like to see addressed when we discuss this again. And I think we will go to public comment now. Just at the mic, yes.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Charlotte Craven. I'm the mayor of the city of Camarillo. And I want you to know I am speaking for my 5-member council. We talked about this last Wednesday night, and so I'm not just speaking for myself. But the City of Camarillo, City Council at least, joins the LAO in urging you to reject this proposal. I want you to understand that on a piece of property that the state owns, there are 3 facilities. There's the juvenile justice facility that houses all of the females 18 and under who are incarcerated in the state of California, as well as males. In the 32 years I've been on the city council, there's been a large change in the population of males who've been there, from the worst of those 25 and under on down to simply offenders. In addition to that, there's the CCC facility that's a short walk, probably a 5 to 7 minute walk from the juvenile offender facility. And in addition to that, there's the camp, the fire camp that has incarcerated male inmates. The City of Camarillo, as an organization, and this facility is immediately adjacent, abutting the City of Camarillo. So it's not in the city, but it's really part of our city because it's so close to us. The City of Camarillo embraces this facility. We have a tremendous number of volunteers who go out and help at the juvenile justice facility. We have people, they have training programs. We have people who take their pets and other things out so that these young people, the children, have clients, maybe pets or whatever, to train on, so they're doing real training. We have people who go out and teach them to read, because some of the people, even though they may be teenagers, they don't have what we would think of the educational background that most of us think of teenagers as having. So we have a lot of people in our community who go out and embrace that facility. We have supported the current fire camp for the incarcerated males. We also cooperate with the CCC facility. Since they first opened in Camarillo, we have contracted for their services for street crews and landscaping. I don't know about our sewage treatment plant. I just don't know, but I do know that we have always had contracts and take usually up to 10 of those young men and women to help, so they can work hand in hand with our people. They're training, they're earning money, and so we support those things. One of our objections to this is, as the LAO pointed out, you're taking the people with the lowest risk, and even though that's something that at the first meeting we had with all of the proponents of the plan, they tell us they're the lowest risk offenders. They're going to be the people who also are the lowest risk of recidivism. Hard word for me to say, sorry. Of reoffending. And there's a lot of money being spent on these. These people have a low risk of reoffending. We think the money, a lot of money, at least in our city, this is a lot of money. It would be best used to help people who have a much higher risk of reoffending. I think that's where the money should go. I don't want to take a lot of your time because I know you have other people to listen to. But I want to tell you about the other concern, a completely different type of concern that hasn't, I don't think, been considered. And our concern is based on our past experience. A few years ago, and time has run out on me, and I don't remember how many years ago, but there was a big problem at the youth facility. The problem was for the young women, the girls. They're all under 18, they're girls. Everybody, when you're my age, everybody's a girl, but these were girls, and they were being raped. They were being raped by some of the male offenders and by a couple of the adults who worked there. There was a tremendous problem. And the city and Senator Hannah Beth Jackson and some other people all came up here and started talking to you, and we ended up with controls within the facility to protect those girls. I was very concerned about the girls. And we ended up with a $6 million fence that's 18 feet tall. Nobody's going to climb over the fence. The girls are well protected. My concern, and the concern of my fellow council members on the other side, is the 30 young women between the ages of 18 and 25 who are at the CCC facility. These women didn't do anything. They're not locked up. The parolees are there. We are tremendously concerned about what can happen to the young women, in the CCC facility when you put 80 additional men there, not like the men who are currently there and locked up, but men who are there and on parole and free to come and go. So those are our concerns.
Do we have additional public comment?
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Bill Ayub. I'm the Assistant Sheriff with the County of Ventura. Thank you for your time this morning. I heard some great conversation.
Assistant
Sheriff?
Oh, Sheriff, sorry.
Yes.
Didn't hear that.
Law enforcement. As you can imagine, we're responsible for the unincorporated areas of Ventura County, and we are the municipal police force for the city of Camarillo as well. This property resides in the county area, but it is right on the fringe of the city of Camarillo. And we've embraced that, like the mayor said, we've embraced that facility for the very many years that it has been there. And our organization, our philosophy is very progressive on the creative ideas for knocking out recidivism and for focusing our resources on prevention. So we embrace those ideas generally. In this case, we without a clear pathway to employment, we're skeptical about the efficacy of the program. The fire service locally in Ventura County is incredibly impacted with applicants, very high quality applicants, many of whom that can't get hired because there's such a high level of saturation in that field. And the likelihood of convicted felons coming out of a program with basic skill sets, I don't think gives an adequate advantage to them to be really competitive in that market. On the public safety side, we have no problem with the Ventura Conservation Camp that's there. We have lockdown inmates, and as we do at our county jails and across the county. This idea of having a stream of parolees cycling in every 30 or every 3 months, my understanding is there's 20 new parolees that will come in systematically every 3 months. That creates a dynamic in the community that we've never experienced before. Camarillo organically has 24 parolees. This is a 333% increase in the number of convicted felons that have access to that community. And as law enforcement, I just felt that it was important for me to voice our perspective and let you know that although it's an interesting idea and may prove successful in some regards, we don't support the idea of having it at this particular location.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Good morning, almost afternoon. Hello, Chair Skinner and subcommittee members. For the record, my name is Kelly Long. I'm a Ventura County Supervisor, District 3. This camp lays in the area of Supervisor John Zaragoza, and City of Camarillo is in my district. We submitted a letter to you earlier that you have received that Senator Bell spoke about. And first of all, I'd love to say thank you to CalFire and Cal OES, Cal Highway Patrol, amongst FEMA and all the others for helping us out on the Thomas Fire. It is the #1 fire for California, unfortunately. And so we are quite aware of inmate paroles, firefighters, and so forth of our area. We also have a couple training facilities for Oxnard and Ventura County for our firefighters. So we are always training for firefighters. And we also know the impact of that job market. And so we agree with the LAO's report in many facets, one of them being the idea that you can actually get a job for these 80 people after they're done with their 18 months. The worst case scenario is that we have been paying them for 18 months to get a job. And after that 18th month and 1 day, they're removed from the facility with nowhere to go. I think that is a huge thing that we need to look at when we're talking about this. The one thing is community safety. That's a huge thing that we need to make sure that the checks and balances are put in place, that they're working with Ventura County, because we know there will be issues. Recidivism is at 60%, I believe, and so we know there will be issues at this camp, and we need to expect the worst and hope for the best. We also think that it is very clear that our residents in the area have a serious reservation about this proposed facility and their capability in the surrounding operations. And I appreciate everyone coming down for April 10th to talk with our community. Our elected officials have had that opportunity, and we have submitted our questions, because whether this goes or not, we need to be working together. Also, I really am concerned about the program not producing improved outcomes. I understand that this has not happened, so there is no evidence base to make sure that this works, but we do know that there are current firefighter training programs, and we do know what their hiring rate is. We also know that CalFire hired roughly about 400 hired 400 people. How many applications did you search through? I'm sure you got thousands and thousands and thousands of applications. We have looked at this. We came back and talked with our labor groups, and they're saying, we'll take those 80 people. We'll train them for plumbing, welding, construction. We've got our roads we've got to fix. There are many different places. Mechanical engineer, I am one. You can train those. We have a deficit of people that need jobs. And so I'm just concerned as us pushing it for firefighting. I want this. I agree with the policy, and John Zaragoza, my supervisor, agrees with the policy that you're trying to do. However, the focus is where you're educating them to what job. That's the question. And the other thing, when you're looking at recidivism, there's many models that you look at, making sure their family is around, making sure that they have that support structure to continue the jobs. So I hope that we look at all the different results that we have evidence based on, and we make sure that this program is extremely successful. We also agree that spending $10.2 million for a facility to upkeep is good. I think that's important. So thank you very much. You know where to contact me if you have further questions. Thanks.
Additional public comment? All right, seeing none. I appreciate the work that's been done, and I think, unfortunately, I think almost regardless of what, if we were trying to house 80 folks here, and regardless of what we were training them for, we might have some opposition, and I appreciate that. That is, for the communities that are adjacent, that is a large percent of increased number of parolees from what they're used to. But I would point out that in California, the vast majority of the folks that we house within our corrections facilities, of which unfortunately we have about 130,000 people in them right now, they will return to communities. And hundreds are being released every month, and in effect have, in most cases, quote unquote, nowhere to go, no job secured, no housing, and in a way, Governor Brown spoke to this very, very well in his State of the State. When we look at the percent of people that were incarcerated in California, proportionate to our population when he became governor the first time, compared to today, it's phenomenal. So it's not just the fact that we've grown in population, we've grown in our rate of incarceration. And yet, by every other objective number, our crime rates have fallen. And they've fallen far beyond, somebody else might look at that and say, well, they've fallen because we're housing all these people in state prison. But in fact, when you look at the data, that is not the case at all. They've fallen because crime has fallen. And yet we incarcerate more and more people. And we do a very bad job of during incarceration or after, allowing them or supporting them to successfully reenter in the community. Now, there'll be some who never can, but certainly there are many, many, many who can, and it is our obligation, because it is our policies that so increase the number of folks being incarcerated, to give them the best shot possible when they do return to their communities. So I appreciate what our three departments are trying to do here. And I look forward to what you come back with, in that I would like to see some aspect of this work, but I think that you've heard some of the concerns, and I think we ought to consider it a work in progress. So with that, we'll leave the item open, and we'll move on to our next. All right, so now we're going to issue 2, which is the Department of Corrections, and it's the Career Technical Education Expansion, BCP around that expansion and equipment refresh. You may proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Senator Anderson. As you mentioned, issue number 2 on the agenda today is related to the department's proposal to expand our career technical education program at our institutions and provide an equipment refresh for us so that annually we can update our equipment with industry standards. So with this proposal, our Division of Rehabilitative Programs asks for $8.2 million and 21.5 positions in budget year. Of those 21.5 positions, 13 of them are for our vocational instructors, and the other 8.5 are correctional officers to provide custody oversight of these programs. That amount then becomes $4.5 million ongoing starting in 2019-20. This will allow us to expand these programs to 13 additional sites located at 10 different institutions. And as far as the equipment refresh is concerned specifically, we did a recent analysis of what that ongoing need would be in order to keep this equipment up to date. And the price tag came back at $4.4 million. Fortunately, the department was provided $2.9 million starting in current year for equipment refresh and ongoing funding. So this proposal requests the balance to get us in line with the 4.4 that we'll need ongoing annually. I'm joined by Mr. Ryan Souza, who is our Deputy Director within our Division of Rehabilitative Programs. He's going to provide you a little more detail about the proposal, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Now you may proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senator Anderson. Once again, my name is Ryan Souza. I'm the Deputy Director over Program Support for the Division of Rehabilitative Programs. Mr. Lopez outlined the fiscal part of the proposal really well. There are 2 components of this proposal as referenced. One was the expansion of our career technical programming, and the other is the refresh, and I'll take them in order, a bit of explaining on how that came to be. The expansion proposal was a review of our core programming that we deliver for career technical and a review of our offender population within the last 48 months prior to release, and specifically looking at the criminogenic needs of that population, focusing on the number of moderate to high offenders. When we did the calculation of the programming that was available and compared it against that number, we came up with a gap of approximately 13 essentially programs that we have provided to you today. That request fills that gap, which is approximately 1,100. And when we focused on the expansion sites, we focused on those facilities that either had a lack of programming or minimal programming in order to continue providing adequate programming for those places that maybe had not historically had it. That pretty much explains the expansion component. Jason referenced that in addition to focusing on not only the sites that maybe had a lack of programming, there was a review that focused on making sure that we were being as fiscally responsible as possible with custody coverage. So aiming for sites that already had custody coverage and really focusing on those sites. If they didn't, making sure that coverage was provided. And that's why there's only 7 correctional officers requested in the expansion of 13 sites. The second piece of
8.5, correct.
Sorry, 7 with the relief, so 8.5 total. The second component of the career technical proposal is the actual refresh of it. Again, an analysis was done on historical refresh related to our career technical programming. Those refreshes exist about 5 to 10 years apart on average per program. And we did the analysis and said, not all programming needs to be refreshed on all components. So you'll see in some of the attachments that 50% approximately of our career technical refresh actually needs to be refreshed. So we tried to pay attention to those programs that didn't require full components that needed to be refreshed. Beyond that, I'm here to answer any additional questions on our career technical programming.
Thank you. The question I had is, so first, given our voter action of Prop 57, we want to make sure that all our facilities have the appropriate career technical education programs so that everyone has access to the type of programs that could give them credit, since we've now installed this. And we know that some of our facilities don't, so I appreciate that. But I'm not sure why in the FTE request, why there needs to be the additional correctional officers, since we're not changing the population. And so I have a question about that, and the concern that because given that we are intending for the population to decrease, I'm not as open to having that number. Yes, I can see where we would need additional staffing capacity for the actually delivery of the career training type of programs, but that isn't necessarily our corrections officers. So that's one issue I have. A second issue I have is that we have been told in the past that under Prop 57 regs, we can't make the credit retroactive, so that inmates who have already completed various programs anticipating this, would not get credit, and yet they're being told they can't take a program because they already took it. But we're told that we can't give this retroactive because we don't have records. So I think that we should specify in the trailer bill that if there are any inmates who are told that they cannot take a program due to having already completed it, that they would be given the retroactive credit. Because if we have the record that they already completed it, we should be able to do that retroactive credit. So that's something I would like to see included in the trailer bill regarding this. Senator Anderson.
Madam Chair, perhaps they wouldn't even have to take the entire class over again. Perhaps they could just show that they have the skill set gained from the programming to get the credit as a fast track, not in a cost-saving measure.
Okay, so that might be another way we could additionally consider, because what I was raising is if the department is telling inmate X they cannot take program X because they've already completed that program, then they should be able to be given credit for that program if the department themselves believes the inmate has completed the program. But we could also additionally indicate that if there isn't a record, but the inmate believes they have completed it, that they could test out to get credit.
So just so I don't lose sight of it, the retroactivity issue. So the challenge that the department ran into when we were considering applying retroactively those credits was candidly, correct, yes.
And yet there are inmates who are being told they can't take a program because they already completed it. So there must be some sort of record, maybe not fully, obviously, and maybe not complete. So this is a way to handle for those situations where there is.
Just to explain the decision that was made about the retroactivity, applying credits retroactively, because there were no credits for these programs, the record keeping candidly, the record keeping for these programs was shoddy at best. So we don't have a reliable way to go back and say, inmate A, yes, you provided this or you went through this program 2 years ago, so you get credit, and inmate B, you did not. I think it varies from institution to institution and from program to program. The record keeping just wasn't what it would have been had we had credits associated with those programs, and what we all now wish it could have been. It really just wasn't at that level.
So I appreciate that, and yet we know that when the inmate goes before the parole board, their completion or participation in programs is presented. So I guess what I'm raising is, I am accepting that there are some record issues, but I am asking the department to, since you have indicated we cannot go and recreate all records, for those records that we have, that there be some level of being able to provide credit for the records that we do have.
Your logic perfectly follows, and I 100% agree that we can go in and look at that. The retroactivity, just to be clear, the policy that I've understood and that we've been relaying is that people actually can take the program again. They would just only receive credit once if they had, during their current incarceration. So although there may be some of, I think that information was out there initially, but the stance that we've taken and that we've worked with our partners in the Division of Adult Institutions is that absolutely people have the ability to take that program again if there are not records, and they would receive appropriate credit. As to the fast-tracked process of that, I would have to go back to the department and qualify what that would look like and how we would be able to accomplish that. But people can take those courses again. And to the correctional officer statement, obviously our Division of Adult Institutions are the custody experts, but part of the review that we did with them initially, and why there are only 7 officers when we actually have 13 programs coming up, is because some of the general locations of where these sites will actually be are closed off, or buildings that have not been used for a number of years. So to have no correctional officers there puts both the instructors and potentially just some safety of the offenders at play. And that's the closest site that's available. So that's why it's only 7, but I think DAI will be able to specifically show you, making sure that your concerns are addressed.
Well, this is interesting semantics, because I appreciate your use of only 7, and I would say why 7 versus only. And I would raise that if we know that we are reducing the population as a result of these credits, that we ought to, at that point, have some, and given that we already have legitimately minimum staffing levels in our yards, regardless of how many inmates are in the yard, because if for some reason overnight the population has to grow, you can't just, staff up. So that's why we have these minimum levels, that we should be able to accommodate the few new career training programs with the correctional staffing capacity that we have. So that would be something I would hope that we could achieve and ask when we revisit this, because I'm going to keep it open right now. Any other comments?
You made my comments.
Can I address the retroactivity thing before we totally move on? So the one area where retroactive credit earning is available is education credit. So, and that's where you're going to see, you can't go back and get the same degree twice and get the credits, but it's not necessary, because to the extent the offender can produce that degree or whatever it is that they've achieved, those credits will be applied to their sentence.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Senator Anderson.
I get there might be economies of scale that are in play, and that when you start these new programs that you don't have that same ability, that you're not getting those same economies. So I'd be very interested in seeing exactly how the 7 officers are placed and what the specific reasons are. I don't want any instructors feeling unsafe coming into a facility, and I don't want any of the inmates at jeopardy either. So I think safety is paramount.
All right, thank you, Senator Anderson. All right, so we'll go to issue 3, the innovative programming grants.
Okay, with our innovative programming grants proposal, the department requests $4 million from our inmate welfare fund. So we are not talking about general fund support here, but our inmate welfare fund, starting in budget year to support the continuation of that program. So this program was designed to allow for nonprofit organizations to come into our institutions in areas where they aren't currently occupying by expanding programs that exist elsewhere in our prisons. The program was first established in 2014-15, as many of you probably recall, with an investment from the Recidivism Reduction Fund and IWF. I think it was $2 million from the RRF and $500,000 from IWF. Currently, we have general fund support for these innovative programming grants of about $8.5 million in current year. That is decreasing to $3 million in budget year and then going to zero the following year. This $4 million would just allow the department to maintain that level of these innovative programming grants ongoing. Again, I'm joined by Mr. Souza from the Division of Rehabilitative Programs. That's going to tell you a little more about the proposal, and then we'll take any questions.
Great, thank you.
This proposal stems from the department and the division's request to continue innovative grants, essentially. We have had really positive anecdotal information from these grants, and when we visit the offender population out there that are receiving these grants, there's just been a tremendous amount of change that we can see face to face with these. So that's essentially the request. If you're reviewing the request, we broke this out into two components. With 65% of the $4 million geared towards those receiving or applying with promising practices based on the correctional program checklist, and 35% geared towards what we're calling practice-based, essentially still allowing a percentage of grants to come into our correctional system that are truly innovative and that we truly feel like have benefits to the offender population that are using and volunteering to go into these programs. Specifically, the way that this proposal is written has allowed us the flexibility to create scoring criteria around the grant application to focus on programs that maybe don't have them, institutions that don't have enough grants, focus on a certain population, and has allowed us the flexibility to really tailor these grants to the correctional program checklist for those promising practices and still allow that innovation in the lower level 35%. Part of the 35% that we're fearful, if there's any restricting language or changes to that, is that ultimately it will have an unintended consequence of removing grant programs that we think provide real value and benefit. Things like creative writing, even yoga or our canine programs could potentially fall within that category and would be excluded if everything was focused solely on the CPC promising practice checklist. So I think we've developed the grant and the proposal in a way that really allows the department to work collaboratively with stakeholders to make sure that we are focusing on higher level grants, but would not exclude us from allowing grants in that would be truly innovative to the system and continue supporting those grants. I'm available for any questions.
I know Elio had some comments. I guess the department has a split of 65-35 for, and this is only a $4 million allocation, but the 65-35 being 65 for the quote-unquote proven to reduce recidivism. And so my issue is, it's not clear to me whether we have really a good set of criteria as to what is proven to reduce recidivism. Certainly we have some evidence on a set of programs, but we don't have for all. And so I'm hesitant, I guess, and I'm now responding partly to LAO's concerns, is I'm hesitant to necessarily change the split the department's recommending when the data for us, I don't want to exclude programs that haven't yet been appropriately evaluated. And I think when we say appropriately evaluated, I don't think it can happen right away, because some of them we've only started to put back innovative programming and rehabilitative programming in the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, we basically eviscerated such programming during the recession. And so to know what works, to know whether, for example, the acting programs or yoga programs or such works, we need them for a longer period of time. So I'm hesitant to change the split or cut such things out yet. But anyway, LAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Jonathan Peterson with the Legislative Analyst's Office. somewhat different than when we talk about evidence-based, like we did with the Ventura Fire Camp proposal. The department's innovative program and grant proposal uses a checklist that's developed elsewhere that doesn't completely evaluate a program to determine whether it's evidence-based for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, including some of these programs are very small, so evaluating them is a challenge. So this checklist is a way of figuring out whether they have factors associated with recidivism reduction in order to determine whether they're likely going to be successful at, in fact, reducing recidivism. And so I think it's a different threshold than evidence-based in other cases like we were talking about earlier. And so what we are recommending is that we shift, given that we've identified a goal in this proposal of some of these programs being associated with recidivism reduction, that we target 100% of that funding towards recidivism reduction. And it would be to continue to do what the department's doing with these 65% so that these innovative programming grants that are receiving funding can continue to operate in the facilities. And while there would be there would not be the 35% for the practice-based programs that aren't associated with these factors, we think that there's still an opportunity for those programs that have received grants previously, they were required to be sustainable. So they might have other sources of funding to continue to operate. We're not saying shut them out of the program. And so I think what we're recommending, excuse me, is not only the 100% split, but to make ongoing funding decisions about future rounds of grants, given this is ongoing funding, based on whether they are in fact successful at the goal that's been identified for them.
Yes, and I'm not sure if we know how to define that, but any other comments from the dais? Go ahead, Senator Bell.
I like reducing recidivism. I like reducing prison population, and I like reducing cost. I look at the criteria of those three things. That's sort of my recidivism is one thing. Reducing the population is another thing. Reducing costs is another thing. So, and does the department in the regular budget have any new programs that you're funding within your base budget that you have? Do you have any new? Have you put in your budget programs that you're just starting up in your base budget?
Not beyond what was referenced earlier. We have our cognitive behavioral treatment programs, which were expanded in prior years, including our long-term offender cognitive behavioral treatment program. But in the current budget, it's the grants reference that are really continuing on. That's the one development in this fiscal year was the continuation of the long-term offender grants in particular. And other than that, there has been no new programming.
And you referenced the University of Cincinnati system that they have about reducing recidivism, correct?
Yes.
Why did you choose that versus other criminal justice institutions that have other perspectives? What other perspectives are there?
We had spoken to and heard about some other entities in the state that were using the CPC as a contract building mechanism. The goal here is not to use the CPC as an evaluation criteria, but really kind of build the strengths of who we're awarding these grants to off of that criteria. And we had some initial discussions with Dr. Latessa, and some examples were provided during that conversation that really kind of helped us say we're gearing toward a higher level grant in some respects, focusing specifically on the 65%, and that's how it came in. There was no other conversations that led us to other entities that would have provided the same checklist.
Your national associations, you have your...
Absolutely.
They have recidivism reduction models and that kind of thing. Are there things that are being proposed on a national level that we're not talking about with the Cincinnati approach?
I don't know any specifically, but I do, the way that we've written this proposal allows us to continue incorporating those. It's not going to be solely based on or required to have the correctional program checklist items. Some of them don't even apply to how our grant process would work, but we would be willing to look at and incorporate other aspects as well as we see fit. That's the benefit of how these proposals are written. It's us developing the criteria that can allow those other issues.
And then the last question I have is the dosage, the issue, and that's if you have a bunch of programs that are funded with small amounts of money, you kind of spread it around, that creates a bunch of ineffective programs because you're really not instituting a program at a breakthrough level to have an impact. So the question would be, if you had $4 million and you just sort of spread it around to various things, and you have no impact because you're really not funding anything at any great level, it's not an atypical problem for government when they have resources and they just sort of spread it around, and they're all like sounding good programs, and you know, they sound wonderful, but you're not really funding them where they can have a breakthrough impact on what you're trying to do, reduce recidivism. Wouldn't it be better to focus your efforts on one single attempt to focus on a particular program that has the best, highest level of promise for reducing recidivism and reducing costs in population? So that's a question I have. I don't know, you know, if the LAO thinks that. I think there's people that warn about funding a lot of programs that essentially are underfunded.
I think that's the benefit of innovative grants is as we learn more and we know more and we know the specifics on some of these, that they're having those promising practices and some of the impacts, potential future requests might have the newest program come forward that really does affect those outcomes that we're looking for. But asking for it on a wide scale right now is not something that we had put forward. It's really to continue this innovative process of getting smaller grants. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't just, if you want to fund about 20 programs or 10 or 5, and then you have only $4 million, it doesn't seem like, you know, that comes out of your Dr. Latessa book, by the way. I do research your memos that you write. So I think you have to look at that. That's a warning.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks. If we have no other comments or concerns, we're going to hold this one open. Oh, sorry, public comment on the item. And I think the holding it open is more just what's the right percentage difference. Okay. All right, so now we will go to item number 4, the parole non-ratio positions, which I believe is, 23 new positions.
Thank you, ma'am. So issue number 4 on your agenda is a request on behalf of our Division of Adult Parole Operations for, as you mentioned, 23 positions and $2.3 million starting in budget year to account for the loss of our administrative staff as part of the reduction that occurred back in 2012 in what was affectionately referred to as our blueprint. So with back at the time of the blueprint, that reduction was driven by the fact that we were estimating that our parole population in 2017 was likely to reach about 29,000 parolees. As we've seen in the more recent estimates that our Office of Research has produced, that number is closer to 47,000 in current year and expected to grow to closer to 50,000 in the out years. Obviously changing the way parole is doing their business, where parole agents are captured as part of the recurring population process, as the LAO referenced in their report. These particular positions are not. So this augmentation is just to make that other side of the house whole, consistent with our operations and with our parolee population that we're seeing more recently. I'm joined again by Director Jerry Powers of our Division of Adult Parole Operations. He's going to provide a little more information on the proposal, and then we'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Director Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to give you some perspective, we went back to look at our non-ratio positions relative to the last time our populations were similar.
There you go.
If you look at our
2013
and 14, we had a parole population of approximately 46,000, which is kind of equates to what we have today. At that point, we had 744 non-ratio positions in DAPO. If you fast forward to today, or 2016-17 or 17-18, where the population is right about 47,000, we have about 597 non-ratio positions. So that's fully about 145 positions below, just to kind of give you some sort of comparison. Not to disagree with my colleague in budget, but I'm not sure that this augmentation would make us whole, but it will certainly put us on the road to getting back to where we need on the support side for parole. As to the LEO's recommendation about doing ratioed positions for the support and administrative side, that's certainly something that could be done, and it almost puts us on autopilot, much like our parole agents. As you add parolees, you just do the math. I'm not sure that that is to the benefit, frankly, of the state budget or to DAPO if we do that, because we have all kinds of things that change in our environment, as I'm certain you are aware. As laws change, as technology changes, we'd have to go back and modify ratios. For instance, if technology changes tomorrow, we may not need as many office technicians that are part of that ratio, and we may need more IT folks. As workman's comp regulations change, that can skew your ratios. It certainly makes it easier for us because the positions just kind of come magically as part of that ratio discussion or deliberation. And so based on that, we're here asking for the augmentation for our non-ratio positions, and I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't necessarily have any, except always concerned about increasing our staff capacities when, yes, this is an increased parole population, but anyway, so I'm always concerned about that, but we also don't have our new population numbers, which we will get in the May revise. So we'll hold it till we get those numbers. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. LAO, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to provide a little more context, as the department mentioned, we do recommend withholding action until the new population projections do come in. I just wanted to point out that one of the benefits to using a ratio approach for these support positions and incorporating it into the annual request is that to the extent the parole population changes either up or down, these positions would change with it. So as opposed to giving ongoing positions which may not be necessary to the extent the population changes after the temporary bump of Proposition 57, which we're experiencing now. So that's a little bit about why we recommend incorporating the ratios, incorporating support positions into ratios so that it does change as the population changes. And we recommend that the department plan a timeline for how they could do so in case it takes some time to figure out exactly what those ratios might be so that we get them right and understand how they could be changed to the extent that some of the technological changes or other changes that the department mentioned occur.
But now, does that anticipate that these are temporary folks? Because anytime, the problem with this is if we are, in effect, creating new positions, because the numbers of parolees have gone up, and that appreciate the clarification that it's due to this bump due to Prop 57, unless we did layoffs or there's appropriate attrition, so are you recommending temporary positions?
We're not recommending temporary positions. We're recommending the ratio, basically the positions requested right now, as the department indicated, are kind of to bring them back up to where they were to deal with
Right,
the
but
fact
if
that there
number
wasn't.
drops, how do you go back down?
It's similar to how the department does its other population adjustments, and in some cases it could involve shifting people to other units, other regions, or if it's a small adjustment, meaning you don't adjust a full position, it might mean changing who does overtime or temporary help.
Okay. Go ahead, Senator Bell.
The calculations that you make in terms of how you determine the base budget for determining the ratios and the cost per unit, if you want to call it that. The question I would have is that include the healthcare portion, the mental health, it seems to do that, right?
I'm not sure.
The cost to the parolees' healthcare. The programs that are healthcare oriented, like mental health.
Those would be in DRP. That's not part of, those were taken out of DAPO's budget several years ago.
So where is the mental health cost of the program?
Of parolee programs, it would be part of DRP's allocation.
So that's part of their allocation?
Yes.
So if there was savings in that due to more collaborative work with county, thereby matching the money that we spend on the Medi-Cal program, which could be lucrative to us, there's no savings accrued there in this proposal, at least.
No, these positions would be strictly for support staff internal to DAPO's operations. Things like workman's comp, backgrounds for hiring, processing of paperwork, for lack of a better term. I would point out that DAPO's budget was reduced to an anticipated population of about 36,000. I think Jason might have said 29,000, something like that. And so this is us trying to build back up from that. It never got down that far. Based on AB 109's projections, it never reduced to that point.
Well, so those healthcare costs are in the DAPO budget.
Well, I guess I want to be certain.
What are those healthcare costs? How much?
I can't answer that because it's not part of DAPO's budget. DRP has the treatment, non-mental health treatment contracts. So
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mental health treatment is something that would be provided at the local level to Medi-Cal eligible, because all of our parolees are Medi-Cal eligible. So they'd receive their mental health services, hopefully, at the county level through county mental health.
You don't know, though?
No. I don't know what those costs are. No.
So what I'm talking about is the department interested in collaborating with the counties to get everybody in the parole system covered under health programs at the county level?
Yeah.
Through the Medi-Cal program. If so, what's the plan for that?
I've reached out and actually have talked to the behavioral health directors, their state association, about providing services to our parolees. We get significant resistance from counties at times to providing those services, because there's a sense that because they're state inmates or they're parolees, that the state is responsible for those services and the costs.
We already have a directive, it was already put in budget trailer bill, that any inmates eligible for Medi-Cal would be already enrolled in Medi-Cal before they're released. So that means this parolee would already be on Medi-Cal.
And they are.
Yeah, well, that's our responsibility to do it.
But what we have, what ultimately ends up happening in significant numbers is they'll go and try and access local mental health programs, and they'll be told that they can't access them because they're a parolee.
Well, see, this is why I asked the question, because, and I have legislation on this that you guys are looking at, and I hear you're not too happy about it. So that's kind of what I don't want to have like a big battle about this, okay? But I'm not going to back down on better cooperation with the parole department and the county in terms of getting full wraparound services for our parolees. They have to provide those services. And I'm talking about wraparound, which includes, substance abuse, all the needs that they have, because otherwise the recidivism, that's one of the major components of reducing recidivism, is give them the full wraparound. That includes housing. That includes mental health, full health care, full assessments, all those kinds of things. And unless we're doing that, we're just going to see these people again back in our facilities.
Agree.
So I think we need to like maybe change a little bit on our boxes. And I brought this up at the last meeting, and I'm going to continually bring it up. And until I'm satisfied, I'm not ready to move on anything at this point, but I want to continue to work with you on this.
And Senator, I spent 30-plus years in county government and probation, so I would say that I'm as much a collaborator or willing to collaborate with county government, mental health, substance abuse, healthcare. It's, in my opinion, it's part of their responsibility. They're county residents.
I was a supervisor for 12 years, so they have to do it. They have to do it. And we have to have their cooperation, and they can't be picking and choosing who they provide health care to. See, they have to do it.
And I've started that dialogue with the behavioral health directors as well. I think it's critical.
And then the legislature last year made a significant commitment to housing. The speaker and the president, our president pro tem, produced an agreement that resulted in a major housing legislation. Senator Skinner and I are pursuing even more in our bill, more money for housing. Those supportive housing programs that President Pro Tem Atkins has agreed to with her SB2 funds, those monies, we want to see those monies interrelated with our parolees leaving so they have residential health care treatment when they are in a parole status. See, so we have to kind of, we set it up. We're putting the money out with her ongoing funding that she worked for 3 years. Really, she worked. I was shocked that she was able to get the 2/3 vote, right, Senator Skinner? But she pulled it off right at the end. She worked so hard, and then we got the bond on the ballot, and then we have the No Place Like Home funding, the $2 billion in the Mental Health Services Act funding, and then now Senator Skinner and there's also a proposal in the Assembly for more money for housing, including supportive housing. So we want that. We're putting out for the first time a major commitment for housing, including this whole subject of supportive housing, which is component of the wraparound program. So we're creating a new paradigm with these kind of relationships with the counties. We're putting up our money for the first time. So they have to respond with making sure that all the people that we have living in their communities are covered fully with wraparound services with the Medi-Cal programs.
Senator, I would say if there's a better way for my parolees to access services, I'm all ears.
Okay, let's work on it. Okay. Thank you.
And perhaps the department can think about in what, either what incentives or disincentives the state might need to enact to engage the counties better.
I have a bill on it, but that's just one piece of that. I think we have to think of big.
Yeah, that larger.
We have to think really big on this and just come up with a new paradigm, because we're, for the first time, the state is making this move on this investment on housing and supportive housing. So we have to think about our relationship now with the counties in a different way, where we're not just begging them to do things. We have putting money on the table here.
I'm ready for the conversation, Senator. Thank you.
All right. We will hold that one open, and we will go to our final item, which is the Rehabilitative Achievement Credit staffing.
Okay, with issue number 5, the Department's Division of Adult Institutions requests $2.5 million in 13 management service technician positions, ongoing starting in budget year 2018-19. These MSTs will be primarily responsible for facilitating and tracking inmate participation in the, we usually refer to these programs as RACs, in these RACs, and properly awarding credits within the established timelines. This funding also includes $1.5 million in self-help sponsor funding, which is going to allow the department to provide about 85,000 hours of additional programming. I'm joined for this issue by Jennifer Barreto, who is our Assistant Deputy Director within our Division of Adult Institutions. Ms. Barreto is going to provide a little more detail, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Breda, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Again, Jennifer Barretto, Assistant Deputy Director, Division of Adult Institutions. This request provides the necessary augmentation of staff for our inmate self-help programs, which earn rehabilitative achievement credits, otherwise referenced as RACs. These groups provide critical self-help support for our inmate population benefiting rehabilitation. These programs have a wide range to include alcohol and drug prevention, anger management, anti-gang life skills, victim awareness, parenting, and more. With recent proposed regulation changes as a result of Proposition 57, inmates who participate in such eligible programs, which is referenced as RACs, earn 1 week of credit for every 52 hours of participation for up to 4 weeks per year off their time to serve. These programs are mainly held during our Third Watch program in the evening or on weekends. Naturally, with such benefits, we've seen a significant increase in interest in our inmate population to participate. Self-help sponsors oversee these groups and are temporary help positions comprised of current employees who are appointed to a dual appointment and provide this additional service in that capacity. With the significant increase in interest and growth of the programs, additional resources are required to augment on Third Watch and weekends for those institutions with the highest volume of participation. This will allow for increased programming activities and a reduction of time served for inmates who participate. I'd be happy to address any questions today.
Before you LAO, I call on LAO, can you break down, this is 13 positions, exactly what's the breakdown of, are there any security staff, these management service technicians, what does that mean? Are these all, any of these temporary, or are these all considered permanent? So break it down for me.
Okay. We have 13 MST positions, which are management service technicians. They're a classification that's between clerical support and analytical support. They would all be permanent positions. 12 of them would be deployed to the institutions with the highest volume of programming activities currently, who need the most support now for their programs to continue, with the 13th position overseeing our contracted facilities to ensure all of their programs are equally running. We do not have any custody resources included in this proposal.
No security staff.
Correct.
Okay. LAO.
We didn't raise any concerns on this proposal.
Okay. Senator Bell.
You're not going to have them in every facility, obviously, but what about a third of the facilities?
13 of them. Yes.
13. So the only question I had was, are the women facilities going to receive the same opportunities here as the male facilities?
Yes, all institutions, whether male or female, are participating in these programs.
Yeah, because we visited that, and they had some pretty robust programs over there, especially in alcohol and drug abuse over at the Central Valley one. Are these positions allocated to particular facilities?
Yes, we did identify those based on the threshold of having a need of 30 hours or more that demonstrate the need for an additional permanent position. I should also...
one of them is a women facility.
I would need to check.
Or one of the...
I can do that.
How many women facilities we have now? Three?
We have 3, yes.
So are they going to get... because I think those facilities should... the big thing I'm pointing out here is I want to make sure they have these kind of credit opportunities as well. And I think just a fairness we should have. In fact, those facilities seem to be overcrowded more than some of the other facilities, correct?
We do have a significant inmate population of our female offenders. In this proposal, we do have one of the positions going to our Folsom State Prison, which also houses female offenders, so they would benefit.
So
I should also add that...
I want to look at maybe funding, I don't know, just, I think there ought to be, you got to show us how they're going to be treated. They get the equal service.
Absolutely.
into these programs.
Yeah, maybe we could ask.
Anyway, that's all I had to say.
All of our institutions do have self-help sponsors.
Yeah.
This proposal includes additional funding to augment further those self-help sponsors at all of our institutions to increase those programs. The MST positions are specific to those with the highest volume and that need for that permanent resource.
Many of these positions already exist. This is an addition of.
We currently have self-help sponsors at every institution. Those are those dual appointment positions. The MST positions, this is a new position for us to further expand on this new program.
Just to reiterate, I think Ms. Barreto mentioned it earlier, but the criteria we used in coming up with these 12 institutions specifically was those that had 30 or more hours of programming within the third watch and weekend hours that we were really targeting for these programs.
Senator Anderson?
I actually have some questions, and I apologize that I had to step out. So if you've answered them in your opening statements, I missed it. But who ensures that the inmates are participating fully in fulfilling the requirements in these programs? Is it CDCR staff? Is it the MST? Is it nonprofit staff? Who gives that oversight to confirm that they're actually doing the work?
Our self-help sponsors oversee the programs. There may be volunteers that are assisting in that actual delivery of the program. It's CDCR staff who track all of these hours, record these hours, under the leadership of the community resource manager of each institution, who reports to the warden of the institution.
Okay, and then, so how would you describe their training? Do they have any training on how to track this, or is it just, how does that work?
We do have training for all of the sponsors and those that track the hours to ensure that they're properly tracking and documenting. The courses that or programs that are identified to receive the rehabilitative achievement credit benefit, those are all reviewed and approved by a headquarters operation to ensure consistency and standardization of the process.
Okay.
And Senator Anderson, just to clarify, the self-help sponsors that Ms. Barreto is referring to are state staff. They are dual appointments, so staff at the institutions who go in and support these secondarily.
Okay. So, with these programs, do they rely on the inmates to self-certify that they attended the programs, and or do they just write their name on a list? Or so, really, what I'm getting at, I put these questions in advance, and so the person that's tracking this, what is the procedure? And is it a standard procedure for all the programs, or is it unique to the program?
This is a standard procedure in the institution environment. When inmates participate in program, whether it's school or rehabilitative achievement credit, or they are on their way to visiting, everything is tracked. We need to ensure that we know where our inmate population is. In this setting, we track their attendance. We're tracking that they have arrived to class and when they leave class or the program. And we are tracking all of that then in a database to ensure that we have all of the information for the proper calculation purposes for those credit earnings. So to answer your question, we do track their movements and when they attend and when they miss is also tracked.
Now, when they're attending school, are there any types, so if a person went in and sat and warehoused themselves in that classroom and didn't learn what they were intended to learn, how does that work? So if I just sat there and twiddled my thumbs and refused to participate, but I signed in and I was there for the time, would they get credit for that time? Or do they have benchmarks that they have to hit to prove that they actually are participating?
Specific to this program, this is a self-help program. These are inmates who want to participate to improve. I mentioned earlier in the opening statement, these are things like AA or NA programs, parenting skills, leaving the gang lifestyle, and a whole variety around that. If inmates come and they are not participating in that group setting, then there's a process for us to remove them from that group so that they are not earning those credits when they're not participating.
Are there partial credits, or do they have to be whole credits? So if I was in the program in the last 2 weeks or last 3 weeks of the program, I decide that I'm no longer going to participate, would I just have to complete those 3 additional weeks, or is it goal-oriented that you're fulfilling you're solving for the problem of why you're taking the class?
So, and again, these are unlike education programs or classroom settings where there's exams. These are self-help programs. These are life skill programs. So their credit earning is based on their participation. So they could participate for only a week and receive the credit for only that time period, rather than the full extent of that participation.
You know, part of my concern is if I am in an AA program and I show up 1 week of every month, I'm not sure that that's of any merit that help me in any way. Normally, programs like that, you need a greater participation for them. So how are we reconciling the actual credit against, you know, the actual help? Because if I turn that into once every 2 months, over time I earn a full credit, but I haven't really achieved anything except for cheating myself.
Valid concerns. We fortunately have a significant number of inmate population who want to participate in these programs.
Okay.
And we often have significant wait list. So if we are encountering those inmates who are attempting to attend, just to attend here and there, that's resolved by those who really want to attend and giving them the priority over those who do not want to.
Got it.
Like you have tests, right?
We do have some test and participation materials, correct?
Proofs in the pudding, right?
So I think you've asked this, but I just need to ask it public. Have there been any incidences or situations where inmates have been given time off of their sentence when they actually haven't participated or fully participated in the program? I think you've answered it, but I'd like to just hear it.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Where they have not actively participated, I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Anderson. I know LAO did not express concerns regarding this. You may all be wondering, why am I holding everything open? All of the things that we considered today have new positions associated, and since our job is to be monitoring the budget as a whole, every time we approve any individual item with new positions, it adds to the whole. So we're trying to see what the full impact of new positions is going to be before we take our action. And hopefully we can, through these conversations and through the actions that we've discussed and new may revise, going to give you other data and such, there may be the ability to affect some of the positions. In this case, these are, given what you've described, probably justified. But as I said, since in my experience, it is very difficult once we create a new position to, regardless of how many inmates we may have at some point in the future, to ever eliminate that position. And certainly, I don't want to be responsible for laying people off. I want to be very, very circumspect about creating new positions. So with that.
On that front, Madam Chair, I know that you received a list of those positions, and obviously we've talked at length about some of the proposals, but to the extent after looking at that list, it would be helpful to sit down and have us go through it in greater detail. The department is happy to do that.
Okay, excellent. All right, I think, public comment. Good. That will conclude our Budget Sub 5 hearing for today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Adjourned.